Hello, I'm Ariana, also Astronautariana on Instagram, where I share all about space exploration, women in STEM, my journey with aerospace engineering, and lots more. So make sure to follow me on there. But I'm also really excited to be sharing on YouTube finally, so make sure to subscribe to my channel. Today I thought of doing a Q&A so that we can get to know each other better, and I'm going to be answering your questions from Instagram. Grab a drink. I'm having an iced matcha today because it's really hot here today in the UK, and I'm really excited to answer your questions. My journey, I grew up in Cyprus, where I went to school there, and I really enjoyed physics, math, basically the math-based subjects, and STEM in general. I love science in school. And then one summer I stumbled upon a video of an astronaut on the International Space Station, astronaut specifically, and it just sparked my interest with space exploration. And since then I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I then decided I was going to study aerospace engineering, and I was doing GCSEs and A-levels to study in the UK. So then I applied to universities there and ended up at the University of Bristol, where I studied for 4 years with an integrated master's in aerospace engineering. And I recently, weeks ago, finished my degree finally. I've moved to a new city where I'm gonna start working in October within aerospace engineering. Do you plan on continuing your PPL? So PPL is private pilot's license. I was doing that for around, I think, 2-3 years, but then I had to stop because I moved to the UK. I didn't really have time to do it with uni. But yeah, I've definitely been considering continuing it and finishing it because I only had my solo flights left. So flight hour wise, I've flown around, I think, 30 hours or more. There isn't much left to it basically. So yeah, I definitely want to continue it. And if you have any suggestions for PPL schools in the south of the UK, please comment them down below. Should I be good at physics for aerospace engineering? I would say yes. Don't stress out too much. There's a lot to physics, so there's parts of it that you might enjoy within the unit at schools, there are parts you might not enjoy. It definitely is a must subject for aerospace engineering, and so is mathematics. So if you completely dislike physics and maths, it might not be the right course for you to follow. However, sometimes you might dislike a subject because the teacher doesn't teach it too well. So maybe you just try and look. I would suggest looking for other resources, such as on YouTube. There's amazing resources for like physics, GCSE or A-level, or like high school physics, and try and spark your interest in that. Maybe watch some physics documentaries to get inspired. You need to enjoy maths and physics for engineering. Otherwise, I think you end up really disliking the course. Which thing inspired you the most about aerospace engineering? So as I said, I was inspired by a YouTube video that I watched of astronaut on the International Space Station, and I saw that she had also studied aerospace engineering, which I actually didn't really know what it was exactly in the past. I didn't even know it was like a field that you could follow. With aerospace engineering, give us a ballpark of how much you can earn with this degree. So it really depends in which country you're at. So here in the UK, starting salaries in aerospace engineering are around £30,000 per year, whereas compared to the US, they might be around $80,000 to $90,000 a year. However, obviously the tax is much lower here. The living costs are also much lower in comparison to the US. So it all just kind of balances out. I think as a higher salary later on in life with aerospace engineering here, I'd say around £80,000 that you can reach to, whereas in the US, you know, you have much higher numbers, like $150,000 or more. So it really depends if you're going to be working for a larger company. There's many roles in aerospace engineering, so you can continue on like a higher engineer, for example, like a chief engineer, or you can go into more of the managerial side. I think in general, it is a great way to be able to have a really good salary later on if that's what you're aiming for. And there's always going to be a job that you can work on no matter how stable the economy is. Is aerospace engineering for rocket development or for the big objects like black holes, quasars, and stuff? So aerospace engineering is very different to astrophysics, which is what they're asking about secondly. So aerospace engineering, you're studying about airplanes, about helicopters, and about rockets, from designing them, from the control systems, from propulsion, aerodynamics, and so on. Whereas astrophysics, you're studying about black holes, quasars, about the universe, and the physics behind it. I didn't study astrophysics, so All I know is like the base astrophysics that we did in A-level. So are you staying in Bristol? I'm actually not. I moved last weekend. Shout out to my boyfriend for helping me move everything. But yeah, I've moved here to be closer to work in the south of the UK. How do you apply for internships, and are you going to stay forever in the UK? So yes, I am staying in the UK. I'm currently starting work in October actually at a aerospace engineering startup, which I'm really excited about. And for the internship process, I applied for internships through different company and startup websites. So if you're in the UK, there's a lot of space startups at a science and innovation campus at Harwell. So Harwell is near Oxford actually, and there's so many space startups that you can apply to. For startups specifically, I'd suggest that you can actually email even the CEO of a startup if it's pretty small. If it's bigger, you can just email their HR to see if there's any roles available. If it might be pretty time consuming, but it's definitely worth it, because I think it's always difficult to get your first work experience when you've not had any other work experience. And following on that, for the UK, I'd say you can look into spinternships. So they always have a bunch of spin internships which are specifically for space related ones. So if you search those online, you can actually find them on Space Careers UK, where they share all the space internships that you can do over the summer, and usually apply around January onwards of the same year for the summertime. But for the US, I'm pretty sure you apply much earlier on. I'm not sure when's the time scale, but it might even be that the fall of the previous year, like the autumn of the previous year, you're applying for the summer internships of next year. I'm pretty sure NASA has a ton of summer internships that you can apply to, and from what I've heard from other people, don't get discouraged from reapplying if you've not been accepted to some, or just apply to a bunch of them. And same with look at other, you know, space startups based in the US as well. Don't just focus on those big organizations. Obviously it's amazing if you get an internship at SpaceX, at NASA, Blue Origin or so forth, but it's also amazing if you get it at a smaller startup. And sometimes you can actually learn much more by being in a super fast paced and smaller environment where you can give much more to the company. Which uni did you complete your graduation from? So I studied at the University of Bristol, which is based in Bristol in the UK, so it's the southwest of the UK, and it was an amazing city. I hadn't been to it before, so moving there was obviously pretty exciting but also pretty daunting at the same time. But anyway, 4 years later, I loved Bristol so much. I can definitely see myself living there someday, maybe again. But yeah, it was an amazing uni. It has really close ties to the aerospace industry, based at Filton, which is around a 15-minute drive from the uni. So that's really good because it has many links to industry, which is really important to get from an aerospace engineering degree. Obviously, if you want to stay in academia later on and continue with a PhD or whatever, it's really good for that too. But if you want to go into the engineering industry later, always make sure that you're looking if that university you're applying to has good links with the aerospace engineering industry. For example, in my last year recently, I did a design project on designing a satellite for an interplanetary mission to Venus. It was a small group project, but it was working in collaboration with Airbus Space. So they're the ones who gave us like the whole project and everything, and were leading us throughout that. So it's really good if there are links to industry, because that is some sort of indirect work experience that you can then use during your applications when you're actually applying for full-time jobs. Other universities that are really good for aerospace engineering in the UK are Imperial, based in London. There's also Bath University, there's Southampton, there's Cranfield University, which is really good. It is in a smaller place, but it actually has really good masters, especially like very specified for space as well. There's also Loughborough, I believe, or there was also Leeds, who do aerospace engineering specifically. Obviously, you could still apply to mechanical engineering courses, but they're not going to be as aerospace related. So you might not have units such as rocket propulsion and more space related ones like space systems and so forth. So definitely make sure that if you're applying for mechanical engineering, for example, that you have in mind that you might not have that many space units. But even if you don't, that doesn't mean that you can't then follow on with a space job. You definitely can. Just make sure that you get in those space internships during the summer, or like other space experience that you can be involved in to help you with applications later on. But you can also look at, if you care about rankings, you can search like best universities in the UK for aerospace engineering, and if they're in the top 20 of the UK, that is already really good. Another way that you can study aerospace engineering within the UK is actually through apprenticeships. A lot of the times apprenticeships actually offer you free degrees. So that was very specific to studying aerospace engineering in the UK. But for example, in the US, I don't really know like the best unis there to study. I know Purdue is a really good university for aerospace engineering, but that's about it. So definitely always search like the rankings, and you can always find through that which ones are really good for studying aerospace engineering. Or you can find other people, for example, who studied aerospace engineering on Instagram. I can share a few people here who studied that in the US, and you can always ask them how their experience was studying at their university. What job are you starting in October? So at an aerospace engineering startup. So a graduate role is what you follow on after university in the UK. So it's basically a 2-year contract where every 6 months you change the role that you're working on. So for example, the first 6 months you can do thermal engineering. The next 6 months you can do design engineer. The next 6 months you can do communications engineer, and so forth. And in this way, it allows you to see what you really want to focus on your career later on. And then obviously you can still continue with the company. It's just that it allows you to see what you're really interested in, because the field of aerospace engineering is actually really wide, and engineering in general, it's not that aerospace engineering do everything. You always end up specializing of some sort. Obviously you can end up changing your specialty if you don't like it, but yeah, it's there's so many different types of roles that even after your degree you might not know what each role entails, and it can be quite different to the units you've studied. How can I become an astronaut? Please tell, I really want to, please. So it really depends on which agency you're applying to. So if you're in the US applying for NASA, obviously one of the requirements that they have is to be a US citizen. I don't know if that's ever going to change, because obviously it's a governmental organization, so it does make sense. But then they have requirements, I think, of having studied a STEM degree. It has become much more flexible. In the past it used to be very specific. You had to be like an Air Force pilot, and then it changed to a more engineering based degree. One of the most common ones for astronauts is aerospace engineering, but nowadays I think you can even become an astronaut with other engineering degrees related to biology and so forth, because obviously they wanted to become a much more whole-rounded sort of mission. When they have missions to Mars, you're not just going to want to have engineers on there. You will want to have engineers, you will want to have pilots, but you're also going to want to have biologists and doctors and so forth to be on these missions. And then for ESA, for example, you need to be a citizen of an ESA member state or associate member. So there's loads of member states and associate members. Then you also, again, I think you will have to have studied a STEM degree, and I think there's a certain number of years that you have to have worked within that field, or to have like a PhD on it or so forth. And I can pop the links down below actually for where you can see the different requirements for this. Obviously the world of becoming an astronaut is really changing now with commercial space opportunities. It is only like now it is only applicable to people who can afford it, because these trips are obviously very expensive. But I think there are even citizen astronaut programs that you can apply to and get selected on, such as Space for Humanity. So I think the opportunities will be much more open in the future, but it's still quite limited at the time being. Coming from a country where aerospace isn't even a thing, how can we get opportunities? So as I said, I grew up in Cyprus. That's where I went to school before moving for university in the UK. So there aren't many aerospace engineering opportunities there. It's literally just the airport and that's about it. So you can't really I mean, it is growing over time. There's also the Cyberspace Exploration Organization now, but all in all, it is quite limited for what I wanted to do, what my dream career was like, and that's why I moved here. So I think I'd suggest that you could move to a country to study which has many more opportunities, because once you've done that move for your degree, it's usually much easier to become a resident in that country and then be able to stay and work. So obviously, if sometimes it can be difficult with funding to be able to do that, but there are scholarships and opportunities that you can apply to that. So depending on which country you're applying to, a lot of the times they have different sort of funding and scholarship opportunities for your degree and even for the living fees and so forth. So definitely make sure to look into those before applying to where you're going to. If you do want to stay in the country that you're at the time being, then you could always start something new. Obviously, it's much easier said than done. Advice for immigrants trying to find an aerospace job abroad. So I'm obviously not a UK citizen, so I was looking into applying for jobs early this year and around December last year. So I started looking for jobs, I think from October actually last year, and I ended up finding my job around February, March this year, where it was like finalized that that's what I'm gonna be doing. But there were a lot of companies that I wasn't able to apply due to security reasons. So here in the UK, there's different levels of security clearance. There's security clearance that you won't be able to get if you're not a citizen, or you might have to wait a certain number of years. So here, I believe for the like high level security clearance, you need around 5 years residency. So it can be quite difficult, but also at the same time, what I found is that a lot of startups most of the time are very happy to hire you no matter where you're from, and you can even sometimes work on different projects, even if it, you know, initially you thought you wouldn't have been able to. So it really depends, but there's always an opportunity. I personally, being an EU citizen, it probably did make things a bit easier because I had a few uni friends who needed to apply for visas to be able to work here, and that does make it even more challenging because you need the company to actually sponsor your visa and pay for that for you to be able to stay here. But once again, there are going to always be someone who is happy to sponsor your visa, because having studied aerospace engineering, they're always looking for hiring engineers, no matter, even if it's not a specific aerospace job, even for like computer science stuff, you become a really good applicant and they want to hire you. So I think going with that, there is always an opportunity. It can seem quite intimidating in the beginning, and maybe you might not start off with your dream role, but that's okay. It might just be the first 2-3 years of working. So what's the difference between aerospace engineering and aeronautical engineering? So at university, sometimes they say you can study aeronautical engineering and not aerospace engineering, or the other way around. Usually they might not have any space related units. However, that doesn't mean that you can't work in the space industry later. It's the complete opposite. You definitely can, and actually most unis nowadays still have it as aeronautical engineering. However, a lot of them are starting to include space units in their courses. But by studying aeronautical engineering and just focusing on airplanes, helicopters, UAVs and so forth, you're getting all the like required units that you need to work in the space industry, because most of them are actually based on that, because you still get some sort of propulsion units or some sort of like thermodynamics, and even if it's not specifically rocket propulsion, you basically get all the basics that you need to then work in the space industry. Whereas aerospace engineering usually has some space related units. It might not be that many space related units, because really all you need to study is aeronautical engineering, which gives you the base to then be able to apply in the space industry. And even if you studied mechanical engineering, for example, you can still work in the space industry. And if you studied electrical engineering, there are again roles that you can do in the space industry. What job opportunities are there? So through studying engineering, there are so many job opportunities. So you can either go into the space industry, you can go into the aircraft industry, you can go into the defense industry, or you can go into computer science and data science industry. You can even work as a software engineer. You can go into finance. I have a few friends that are going to finance after studying aerospace engineering. So anything that works with maths and numbers and needs that sort of problem solving mindset, you can most definitely do after university. And there's always going to be some sort of job that you can apply to and get hired for. And actually, from my experience, most of my course mates from uni have been hired and have found a job after uni, which is amazing. So how can I get to ESA if I'm from another country? So I'm guessing not an ESA member state country. So I think one of the ways to do it is to apply to jobs to a European country that is part of the ESA member states or associate members. And through applying for a job, if you end up getting the job, you can move there and end up getting residency there, and eventually over the years get a citizenship, and then you can work at ESA. I don't know if you need specifically citizenship for it or residency, I can't remember, but I think one of the ways would be by applying for jobs in ESA member states and associate members. Another way to do it would be for applying to universities there if you're still going to university now, so you can apply to study at uni there. And a lot of the times actually European universities are free or have really low fees compared to other countries, so that is always a really big plus. So definitely look into that, and once again that can then allow you to get residency and eventually citizenship so that you can work at ESA. And then a lot of the times there's also companies that are contracted with ESA, so you might not be directly working for ESA, but you might be working on projects that are in collaboration with ESA, which is really cool too. Okay, I think this video might end up being pretty long, so I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you so much for sending your questions, and I hope you've gotten to get to know me a bit better through this YouTube Q&A. And I'm really excited to be posting more on here, so make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm gonna be sharing about my journey within aerospace engineering, different vlogs at like air shows or cool space events and space conferences. I'll be sharing about space exploration and lots more. So yeah, definitely make sure to subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for watching.